In this episode of Locked On Capitals, we talk about two Hershey Bears players that got new contracts, Beck Malenstyn and Brett Leason. Then we talk about Alexeyev and what his future is with the Washington Capitals. And then we will discuss the latest on what I know about Nick Backstrom's injury in the future of the Washington Capitals. We'll talk about all of that and more next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all of the major platforms, and I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check that out. My name is Dan Holmig. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this episode, that is what we are going to talk about, the Washington Capitals preparing for their future. Today, the Hershey Bears and the Washington Capitals signed Beck Malenstyn to a contract and Brett Leason to a contract. We'll talk about that in this show. But to start it off here, I'm going to talk to you about what I know about the latest on Nick Backstrom's injury. I saw this as I was preparing for the show. This was on Twitter by a Dr. Harjas Grewal. You can find him on Twitter. It's at HARJAS_GREWAL. And what he is doing is he is commenting on the different injuries around the NHL and what his thoughts are on them. And on this particular one, he was talking about Nick Backstrom. He said, hip resurfacing replaces the surface of the top of the thigh bone, and if needed, the socket where the thigh bone meets the pelvis. Odds are against Backstrom returning to the NHL. Kessler was not able to return, but Jovanovski was, and Andy Murray also returned to tennis. He went on to say, I think Backstrom definitely tries to make a return, and it wouldn't be a surprise if he played at some point this year, but I don't see him playing out the rest of his 3-year contract. Really unfortunate for the most underrated player of his era. Like always, hopefully I am wrong. So that is not the news that we wanted to hear. And I know that that was just one doctor's thoughts on his situation. But if you kind of look at what is done, it's like a cap that is put over the socket of your hip. It is kind of just a really, it's a crazy a procedure to have done. And, just to have that procedure done and then to try to rehabilitate and live your everyday life as just a regular person is one thing. But then to try to go on and compete on the level of an NHL hockey player, that's a totally different thing altogether. So my fingers are crossed for Nick Backstrom, but that is some kind of bad news, I've got to say. And I think, to a certain extent, Nick Backstrom would probably love nothing more than to prove everyone wrong about that. So in some big news, I think it's big news anyway. The Washington Capitals signed 2 players and what I consider future players for the Washington Capitals. I know they played with the Capitals briefly this past season. The Caps have re-signed forward Beck Malenstyn to a 2-year, $1.525 million contract per the team. The first year of Malenstyn's contract is a 2-way contract, $750,000 if he's playing on the Caps, $110,000. And the second year is a 1-way $775,000 contract. And if you don't know the difference between a 1- and 2-year contract, so a 1-way contract is a contract where you get paid one price, whether you play in the NHL or the AHL. But the difference between a 1-way and a 2-way contract is that if you get sent down on a 1-way deal, you have to clear waivers. So that is kind of, there's a couple schools of thought about that. You could look at it as that the Washington Capitals see Beck Malenstyn playing a big role on the Washington Capitals in this second year, the 1-way part of it, or they feel comfortable about the idea of him, clearing the waiver wire and making it down to Hershey. The Caps also re-signed Brett Leason to a 2-year, $1.55 million contract per the team. Leason's is only a one-way contract and will pay him $750,000 in the 22-23 season and $800,000 in the 23-24 season. And, that is kind of one of those tough deals. So that is kind of telling me that the Washington Capitals are all in on Brett Leason, or they are comfortable with the fact that there's a fact that, he might not clear waivers, or, maybe the Capitals are so confident that he will clear waivers if he gets sent down. I guess it really depends on how you want to look at it. But in any event, I think that those are two solid moves by the Washington Capitals as this team is preparing for the future. We've talked about that in this podcast, and it's been talked about around the NHL that the Washington Capitals need to get younger. And I think that now is the time. We saw what we had in Leeson and Protas and Malenstyn and Faravari, and that is that youth infusion that the Washington Capitals so sorely need. Like I said, this is a league that is getting younger and faster. So I think that is taking care of some situations, some kind of lower dollar figure contracts that make sense. I think that Beck Malenstyn does have a role with the Washington Capitals, and I also think that Brett Leason does as well. The Beck Malenstyn one is the one that is a bit interesting to me. I do think that just from what I've talked to from some different players or some different people, is that Beck Malenstyn might play and fill a role kind of what Tom Wilson had. Beck Malenstyn has 16 points, 10 goals, and 6 assists this past season. So he is kind of that bigger frame out there. And like I said, some people have theorized. I was talking with the Grit and Bear It podcast, and that was his thought, is that Beck Malenstyn may fill that role of Tom Wilson on the Washington Capitals. So it remains to be seen. I think that, that is some wise decision making. As we know, Tom Wilson will not be with the Washington Capitals until, December the earliest. So to, shore up those loose ends and try to find someone in Hershey that can take on a role, something similar to that, would be a good decision. So good on the Washington Capitals for signing him to a new deal. And then the other player also is Brett Leason. As you know, he also played with the Washington Capitals this past season. In his career, or this past season with Hershey, he had 13 points, 6 goals, and 7 assists. So I would expect to see more of these kind of contracts getting signed throughout the summer months as they kind of go through and take a look at what they have in Hershey, and then kind of just making some big decisions as to which players that they want to keep, and then which ones that, they're going to have to let go, because they're not all going to work out. But, there are those 2 players that they signed, Malenstyn. Like I say, I think that he does have a spot on the Washington Capitals. I also think that Leeson has a spot on the Washington Capitals in the future. And, just the fact that they were willing to extend and make those one-way contracts. The one was a second-year one-way contract, but still, that shows you that they are serious about those players, and they see them having a future with this Washington Capitals team, which I think is so important. Because I think that ultimately there are going to be some big splashes that are made in July as we are coming up on the free agency deadline. Ultimately, it would be advantageous for the Washington Capitals to take care of these situations before then. I also think it would be wise for the Capitals, if they are going to pursue a veteran netminder, that they do it before then, because if they wait until July on the deadline, they are going to pay top dollar. And that's generally, not real sound logic doing things like that. So I think that, like I'm saying, I think that it is a good idea for the Washington Capitals to take care of as many of these loose ends as possible, as soon as possible. All right, so after the break here, we are going to talk about Alexeyev and what his future is with the Washington Capitals. Right, so Built Bar. You know how our friends at Built are always coming out with amazing new flavors? Well, this time, Built has truly outdone themselves with their new mud pie flavor. And for the first time ever, Built is introducing the new mud pie flavor in both Mud Pie Bar and Mud Pie Puff. Not sure what mud pie tastes like? Well, if you're a chocolate fan, you better sit down for this one. The new mud pie bar is a rich whipped cream and chocolate mousse smothered in 100% real chocolate and topped with cookies and cream crumble. You've got to try mud pie as soon as possible, and you need to hurry because the mud pie and mud pie puff are available for a limited time. Visit built.com to taste the deliciousness for yourself. Not convinced? Luckily, we saved the best for last. It's actually good for you. No, really. All Built products are low calories, high protein, and low sugar. Mud pie is packed with 16 grams of protein and only 150 calories and 8 grams of sugar. It's like your mom baked the most delicious creamy chocolate mud pie and wrapped it up just for you. Mud pie bars and puffs are available at built.com right now, but they're going fast because they are delicious. Like all Built bars, they are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means they're healthy and tasty. What's great about Built is that all their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of healthy benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the new Mud Pie Built bar and Built Puffs. Whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just grab a quick bite, Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Chocolate mousse, whipped cream, cookies, and cream crumble. Stop drooling. Get to Built.com to order your box of Mud Pie bars and puffs now. You won't regret it. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, welcome back. So, in just some other news and some injury news that I wish I didn't really have to talk about was that Alexander Alexiev had to undergo a procedure as well. He underwent a surgical labral repair on his left shoulder. Based on the nature of this procedure, Alexiev is expected to miss 4 to 5 months. So this is not really great news. I was going to say that Lucas Johansson and Alexander Alexyev were poised to make their big push to play defense for the Washington Capitals. I think that as we talked about, that Schultz probably played his last game with the Washington Capitals in the defense capacity. Is that I think that that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to go younger. They wanted to go with Lucas, and they wanted to go with Alex, but it doesn't sound like Alex is going to be ready for the start of the season. So he's going to miss some considerable time, and that is quite a setback for the Capitals. And, like I say, it's a bit unfortunate in the regard that it really seemed like they were poised to go all in on Alexiev. Alexiev had 19 points, 1 goal, 18 assists in 68 regular season games with the Hershey Bears last season, and chipped in an assist during the team's 3-game series against the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins during the playoffs. Alexiev's injury comes at a time when he could have been in the mix for a full-time promotion to the Washington Capitals. At the start of the season, the Capitals are not expected to re-sign right-handed shooting defenseman Justin Schultz, who is an unrestricted free agent. In July, the Capitals will likely flip Trevor Van Riemsdyk, who was skating on his offside, to Schultz's spot on the right. The team could then either sign a veteran defenseman during free agency or promote someone like left-shooting Alexiev into Trevor Van Riemsdyk's vacant spot. With Alexiev out, the Capitals' internal options include lefties Matt Irwin, Bobby Nardella, and Lucas Johansson. The team could also give righty Dylan Mickelrath playing time as well. Alexiev, 22, made his NHL debut for the Capitals on December 29th, 2021. This is in RMNB. And, that's what I've talked about. And I talked about, a few weeks ago that I did my breakdown on Lucas Johansson. And I think that he, served a really great chance of getting a starting role with the Washington Capitals. I talked about that this team is in the middle of what I would call a retool, or what Ted Leonsis calls a retool. And I think that that's what you're going to see. I think that you're going to see some of these younger players slowly work into the system, just because, just take a look. You look at the productivity of a Lars Eller, and you take a look at the hip injury with Nick Backstrom. This Washington Capitals team is not getting any younger, so now is the perfect time for some of these younger players in Hershey to get their opportunity on the big team. Now is the perfect time to do something like this. And it's just kind of a real bummer, I guess you could say, that Alexiev had to have that procedure done and is going to miss considerable time. Hopefully he can come back and contribute to this Washington Capitals team. But now the questions abound of who is going to fill those spots to start off. So kind of let's take a look at who's going to be missing from the Capitals to start off the beginning of the season. Some kind of big name players, big name marquee players, to be honest with you. Nick Backstrom is going to probably miss, he could miss the entire season, right? Tom Wilson, the soonest he could come back is December. And then Alexiev is going to miss a considerable amount of time as well. So that's kind of putting the Capitals in a tough spot. You take a look at Alexiev to miss 4 to 5 months after this shoulder surgery. So, when we talked about and looked at this article, they talked about guys that could fill in. And, personally, I don't see Matt Irwin sticking around with the Washington Capitals. I know that there's some kind of crazy times going on with the Capitals with all the injuries, but I don't see him as just someone that they're going to hold on to. I do think that Lucas Johansson will most likely get his spot on the team. But, like I say, it's kind of just poor timing, I guess you could say, more than anything, that this had to happen to him because, if it wasn't for this injury, I really think that you would have seen him starting for the Washington Capitals. In fact, I know you would have. So the Capitals are going to have to kind of, I think, look at what the free market has out there, what kind of free agents are available, which players are available for trade. Because, we look at this team, and the one thing that I don't want to see happen is I don't want to see another first-round exit, or even worse, I don't want to see a Washington Capitals team that doesn't make the playoffs, period. So they are going to have to kind of take a look around and see what is available, because now is the time to do it. Like I say, if you can take care of this before the deadline, you can usually get these deals done cheaper. But I know a lot of times agents and that kind of thing, they want to hold out to the last minute so they can squeeze the most money out of a team to pay their player and ultimately them. So that's one of the things that they're going to have to deal with. And, like I say, some tough decisions to make for this Washington Capitals team as they go forward and kind of try to rebuild and retool this team that, let's face it, wasn't really built for the playoffs. Because say the Capitals made it past the Panthers, then they would have gone on to play the Lightning. And we all see how that's going. As I'm recording this on Monday night, the Tampa Bay Lightning were kind of doing what they do best, and that's coming back from pretty big odds and turning it around. And as I look at the score here, the last time I checked it, that the Tampa Bay Lightning were ahead. And, I was talking to the wife about this, and I said, do you think to a certain extent that, as I'm recording this, it is 6-2 Tampa with 6:40 left in the third period. Do you think the Tampa Bay Lightning were kind of toying almost like a cat with a mouse with the Colorado Avalanche? Are they going to close the trap on the Avalanche? This is what they do. This is the pedigree of what the the Tampa Bay Lightning do. If you take a look at what they did against the Rangers in the previous series, the Rangers were up in that series, and guess what? They're now playing golf somewhere. So I think that this is kind of a real interesting Tampa Bay Lightning team. As you take a look at them, like I say, is it by design? I would not like to think that they would have wanted to lose by, what was the score the other night? 7-0. That's got to really mess up Vasilevsky's record. If you take a look at it, he was just lauded as this, great number one netminder. I don't think a lot has changed in that regard, but, I think it was pretty, memory serves, 7 goals against him in that last game. So there's a lot of questions that beg to be answered about that game as well. Is why didn't they pull him? If you look back on that Patrick Waugh situation when he was playing and they left him in there and they just kept lighting him up, that kind of had to, I don't know what the point was. Why keep Vasilevsky in there? At a certain point, I was thinking to this and I was talking to the wife, when it was 5-0 and 6-0, you knew there was no chance of coming back. So why not put Elliott in there and just give Vasilevsky some rest? At this point, I don't think that Vasilevsky's ego is that fragile that he couldn't handle getting pulled. Some kind of questionable moves there. I don't think that, it would have appeared good on paper anyway. I don't think it would have really stemmed the tide for what was going on out on the ice. All right, so after the break here, we are going to continue to talk about the future of the Washington Capitals. What's next? What needs to get addressed before the start of next season? We'll talk about that next. All right, welcome back to this edition of Locked On Capitals. So in this episode, we are kind of looking around the team and some news of the day. As I started off in this first segment, there was a doctor that was on Twitter, and he talked and he thought that the chance of Nick Backstrom coming back is pretty remote. And you can take a look that up on Twitter. He is a doctor that is what he's doing this year is he is looking at different players. Dr. Harjas Grewal, I'm sorry if I'm saying his name incorrectly, but he said that he really doesn't see Nick Backstrom coming back. He says, I think Backstrom definitely tries to make a return, and it wouldn't surprise me if he played at some point, but he does not see him playing out his contract. We also then talked about Beck Malenstyn and Leeson getting new deals, and then the unfortunate news of Alexeyev and what the future is for him. So kind of taking a look at some other news, and there's all kinds of rumblings out there about what players would play best for the Washington Capitals. And one of the more intriguing stories that I've heard out there, and this is what I'm talking about. This is the talking heads around the NHL trying to spin a story is Bobrovsky. This was on Kyprios's show. Nick Kyprios, he talked about it, and then it kind of just took wings from there. Is he talked about the opportunity or the possibility of Bobrovsky coming to the Washington Capitals? And what are your thoughts on that? Hit me up at Twitter at DanCaps218 or at LockedOnCaps. What are your thoughts on Bobrovsky coming to the Washington Capitals? Okay, knee-jerk reaction. I love it, of course. And then the real interesting thing, and I'm, doing this one on the fly, sort of. I don't have the info up on here, but if memory serves, Florida was going to retain 50% of his salary. I think that is some pretty solid, that's a solid savings for any team that picks him up. It's kind of a bit curious as to why the Florida Panthers would like to do something like that. I mean, I know that they didn't get the desired result that they wanted, but they made it to the playoffs, something that has eluded them for so many years. And then to give up a big name like Bobrovsky, it seems a bit questionable. And I know that it's Nick Kyprios. He's not the be-all, end-all on everything, but, he's trying to create a name and some buzz for his show on, like a lot of these podcasts do. But I do think that is intriguing, and I think that most Washington Capitals fans would welcome Bobrovsky with open arms. I mean, could you think of any greater tandem of having him being the number one and then either Samsonov or Vanacek as a number two? I definitely think that the Washington Capitals would be sitting pretty if that is the case, and that's what I talked about. And we can this is the crazy season, and we can talk about things like this. Is that I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility. We're talking about the Washington Capitals. We are not talking about the Coyotes. We are not talking about the Kraken. I know it's only their first season, or the Sabres. This is a team. This is a legitimate team. This is a team that won the Stanley Cup in 2018 and perennially makes it to the playoffs. Generally speaking, they don't make it past the first round, but could someone like Bobrovsky coming to the Capitals, could that be what the doctor ordered in the net mining department? Of course it would be. It remains to be seen, and I would, of course, the first one to cover it for you. That'll be the, breaking news. I'll probably go live if they sign someone like that, but it would be most interesting if the Washington Capitals could pick up someone of that caliber. So what is one of the other big names out there is Gibson from the Ducks, and that is another one where I'm all in. I'm all in on the Washington Capitals getting Gibson. I think that, they would probably demand the King's ransom to get him. So I would be a little bit wary of what the Washington Capitals would have to give up to get him. And ultimately, that was a story that was just kind of shot out there, but then was muffled right away by Gibson's agent and by the Ducks in general. They said that, there is no plans to move on from Gibson from the Ducks. So I think that ultimately, I don't know if he's going to leave the team. I think they're probably going to try to re-sign him. But just, kind of kicking names out there. I think that most Washington Capitals fans would welcome Gibson on the team as well. So that is what the rumor mill is out there, and it is swirling. And it's always netminders, of course, because, that was the great deficiency of the team. Ultimately, who will the Washington Capitals pick up as their number one netminder? because that's what it's all about right now. We know it's going to be Samsonov or Vanacek as the number 2 most likely, and then they're going to go out and swing for the fences and try to get that big name number 1 netminder. Is it going to be Bobrovsky? Is it going to be Gibson? There is so much to think about, and in this offseason, that's what you can almost kind of dream about. Who do you want to see in net for the Washington Capitals next year? Both of those names, they make me excited about it, to be honest with you. I would love nothing more than to see one of those netminders on the Washington Capitals. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from our local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals.